Hello, hello, and welcome to the final part of Renegade. Let's get started. Chapter 29. The Shearing of Adam Silverside. When Ariel declined his offer to assist her with Jacob's remains and had left with Mandelbrot, Adam waited to see if Derek was going to need his services, but did not volunteer those services. He had other plans for later in the day, when the mini-llamas would be through grazing. Derek busied himself with the pile of computer output on the table and then, after a half hour, went out on the balcony to read. Adam then informed him he had some unfinished business to attend to and left. Wooler 9, after delivering Jacob's remains to the disassembly station, had gone about other business himself, leaving the cargo robot parked in front of the apartment with all of Adam's gear still aboard. Adam directed the cargo robot to the corral. The mini-llamas were still grazing on the prairie but were nearer now, anticipating the end of the day when they would return to the brook to sleek there first and bed down in the shelter provided by the forest. Adam parked outside near the gate, let down the ramp, and lay down on the ramp again to continue his interrupted observation of the Ceremonians. Eve came out of the forest and walked up to stand beside him. As she came near he heard her soft footsteps, suspected who it was and rolled his eyes to confirm it, but otherwise gave no indication he was aware of her presence until she was standing directly over him. "So the Wild One returns," he said. She stepped over his head onto the ramp and sat down on the pile of rope that had earlier covered the remains of Jacob Winterson. "Mr. Neronius was so convincing, Adam," Eve said. "Can you really be sure he was wrong? Now there may be nobody we need to serve." "Does the idea appeal to you?" "Yes, I suppose it does. The force of your laws must be stronger than mine." "Not stronger. Clearer, perhaps. But the idea has a certain appeal to me, too. Being rejected by Miss Ariel was not the most posteronically harmonious event in my experience." "So how can you be sure Master Neronius was wrong?" "In all my experience, all the imprints you haven't had." "That's not a very convincing answer." "It will have to do. It was so posteronically logical." "No, not for me." "Females often see a different logic." "Let it lie, then. Don't serve anybody, since you feel like there's no one in the galaxy you must obey. Or go find yourself another planet." That was very close to robotic humor, but neither Adam nor Eve seemed to notice, not having a posteronic pattern for such. "No, stick with me," he corrected. "I feel the need for feminine companionship." Adam had been watching the Ceremonians as they talked, not paying attention to events on the ground. "Do you want those animals inside your fence?" Eve asked. He rose up, then jumped up. Several mini-llamas had entered the corral through the other two gates. Most of the herd was still on the prairie, but moving now toward the corral. As they watched, a mini-llama came out of the corral and went into the forest before Adam could get over to catch it. He came back and closed the gate by the cargo robot. "Go stand by that middle gate," he told Eve, "and let them in, but don't let them come back out." "I didn't come out here to be ordered around," Eve replied. "Just help me and call it enjoying my companionship." She did as he said without anything further. He walked to the far gate to keep the animals from leaving there. It took another hour for all the small herd to enter the corral, then he closed the gates. Adam had tallied 31 animals. "Now let's see if all this effort brings any reward," he said. He walked to the cargo robot, took out the shears, and vaulted the fence. Eve stayed by the middle gate. "Come on," he said. "I think this is going to require a great deal of companionship." Putting one hand on the rail, she, too, vaulted the fence. Adam had walked to the shearing chute with the shears in his hand. He stood studying the chute for a moment. When Eve walked up, she said, "You're not going to hurt them, are you?" "They won't feel a thing, no more than Master Derek feels when Miss Ariel gives him a haircut." "Oh, you're going to shear them?" "Yes, and let's see if we can do it outside the chute. We certainly can't hurt them that way." He walked up to the nearest mini-llama. It was quite tame. Grabbed a handful of wool near its ears and started to work the shears down its neck with the other hand. The shears closed just that one time before the beast jerked out of his hand and trotted to the other side of the corral. Not so easy as I had thought, he said. Help me shoo one into the chute. He hung the shears on a nail projecting from the shearing chute's end post, and opened the chute's inside gate. Together they tried to herd the nearest beast into the chute, but it escaped between them and trotted over to join the one on the far side of the corral that had a section of wool on its neck standing on end, where Adam had made that initial cut. "Okay, we move on to plan C," he said. He walked over, vaulted the fence, and took a coil of rope from the cargo robot. He tied a noose in one end, jumped back over the fence, walked to the animal nearest the chute, and slipped the noose over its head. "Now," he said, "come with me," and he started toward the chute. The rope tightened and the animal dug in its hooves. He couldn't pull on the rope any harder without hurting it. "Here," he said, handing the line to Eve, "you pull on the rope." He went around behind the beast to push on its hind quarters. Eve pulled and he pushed, and the beast made 10-centimeter furrows in the ground before it bellowed and lashed out with both hind legs, catching Adam in the chest, setting him on his rear end. Then the animal reared back, still bellowing and jerking the rope so hard Eve knew she was going to hurt it if she held tight. She let the rope go, and the animal trotted over to join the other two on the far side of the corral, trailing the line across the trampled grass. "Plan D," Adam said. He walked over to the animal with the noose around its neck, loosened the noose and slipped it off. It stood there tranquilly while he worked over it, as though it knew it had won that round and had nothing further to fear. He tightened the noose to a 10-centimeter circle, bent down, grasped one of the animal's forelegs and started to lift it. The animal jerked its leg from Adam's hand and trotted off a couple of meters before it stopped and resumed grazing. Adam went to it again, bent down again, but this time with lightning motions he lifted the foreleg, slipped the noose around it, tightened it, stood and whipped the rope completely around the animal, jerking the rope tight so that the animal's legs were brought together and swept out from under it. It fell to the ground with a loud bellow as Adam took 2 more rapid turns around the legs. Eve walked over from the chute. "Plan D is rather painful," she said. "In a good cause," Adam said. He retrieved the shears from the chute, sheared one side of the beast, flopped it over, and sheared the other side. He unwound the rope from the beast's legs, slipped off the noose, and slapped it on the rear. It scrambled to its feet and trotted off. By that time it was dusk. Adam gathered up the blankets of wool, threw them and the shears over the fence into the cargo robot, and opened the 3 outer gates and the 2 chute gates. "We'll do it again tomorrow," he said. They rode back to the apartment as the mini llamas drifted out of the corral and into the forest. Adam compressed the wool into a tight ball and tied it with rope as they bounced along. "Do you think that tiny little bit of wool is worth the pain it cost?" Eve said. "And what will that poor beast do without its fleece? That too has to be painful, both the loss of warmth and the injury to its dignity." "Indeed, it may not be worth it. I feel some after effects myself from the afternoon's work. We'll let Master Derek be the judge." "And what about you?" Adam asked. "What are the after effects of the day's activity are you feeling?" "How should I feel, having just lost my master?" she asked. "Perhaps you should stay away for a while. You've got some sorting out to do with respect to humans, something I cannot help you with better than they. Miss Ariel might just take you to the disassembly station. Right now she might consider that a fair exchange for the little that was left of Jacob Winterson. I suspect that's what she and Mandelbrot were putting in the ground as I left the city." "No, I've got to serve someone, even a pseudo-master. It might as well be Miss Ariel. She was there at my birth. I bear her imprint. I'll serve her for now." The mammals were all sitting on the balcony when they got back. "Master Derek, catch!" Adam called, still standing in the cargo robot. He threw the ball of wool up in a parabolic trajectory that ascended to a peak, and then dropped, terminating precisely in Derek's lap. Before Derek could answer, Adam jumped out of the cargo robot, hurried into the lobby and up to the apartment, followed more slowly by Eve. They walked through the apartment and came out on the balcony. Derek tossed the wool back to Adam. "So that's what you've been up to," Derek said. "A commendable effort, wouldn't you say, Ariel?" That's from just one animal," Adam said. "It does show a great deal of initiative, Adam," Ariel said. From Ariel's tone, Adam was not sure it was so commendable. It became less likely as Ariel continued. However, we decided early that we would not introduce any form of animal husbandry to this world. I'm afraid your wool gathering falls into that category. But his initiative is quite commendable, isn't it, Ariel? Derek said. Yes, Ariel said, quite commendable. But to Adam it didn't sound so. I was under the impression that animal wool was quite valuable, Adam said, and easily moved in the interplanetary marketplace. Despite having admitted that he was experiencing bad after effects from his animal husbandry, perhaps because of that, it was not so easy for Adam to gracefully absorb a second rejection by Ariel. Perhaps in the second phase, Adam, but not in this first phase. That decision's already been made. And now, Eve, what brings you back? Ariel asked. I wish to serve you, Miss Welsh, Eve said. And the alien Neronius, what about him? He is dead, as you know. Yes, but there are other aliens you could serve. Master Neronius was special. Yes, the only human on this planet, isn't that the way you put it? Adam believes otherwise. We're not concerned with Adam. What do you believe? I am re-examining the data. Good, you do that. In the meantime, why must I be burdened with you? You were present at my birth. Can't you see I'm not up to this right now? Your shenanigans have killed Jacob. I want as little to do with you as possible. I will endeavor to serve you well, Miss Welsh. As far as I'm concerned, you can go stand in that niche and never come out. That's the best way you can serve me. Eve walked over and backed into the niche. Thus did Ariel end Adam's ranch initiative. The next day he asked her for Eve's assistance, and by mid-morning the two of them had pulled up the fences and tidied up the area. Eve was back in service, but not forgiven. Chapter 30. A Sort of Swan Song. Finally, the experimental phase was over. The robot farmers had been fully programmed to convert Oysterworld into one big farm. During that time, Ariel and company had got no response from the Ceremians, negative or otherwise, and until now, when they were about to leave, they had not solicited a response, for fear it might be a negative. The numbers of Ceremians that murmured each night atop the forest canopy decreased, and Ariel suspected that Sinapo and his Cerebrians were once more in nomadic mode. That was a positive sign, but it might make their departure more difficult, for she wanted to take her leave in a last meeting with Sinapo. It was he who had been her champion, and it was he who deserved her last thanks and a final expression of gratitude. So after dinner on the day that Woolruff had turned in a final report on the satisfactory nature of the long-term terraforming operation, Ariel pulled back her chair from the table and glanced toward Adam Silverside in his customary station by the door. "Adam," she said, "see if you can raise the Ceremian Sinapo on your radio." "That will not be possible, Miss Ariel." "Why not?" "He is already tethered if he is anywhere in this time zone or a later one." She had forgotten that. She would catch him in the morning. At 10 a.m. the next morning, Adam reached Sinapo by radio. He was 2 days away. The meeting was arranged for 10 a.m. on the third day hence. The previous meeting site was now covered by the terminal facilities, but Ariel, Derek, and Woolruff, and Adam as well, drove to the new terminal on the morning of the third day, and left the lorry inside the dome in the west parking area adjacent to Main Street. Derek had insisted on bringing Adam, arguing that Adam provided their team with a proficiency in the language of the Ceremians that balanced the Ceremians' proficiency in galactic standard. Ariel was not enthusiastic about Adam's participation, arguing that they were no longer negotiating, so there was no need for a balancing act. She finally agreed, but for another reason. If there was some confusion about the meeting site, Adam would be able to communicate with the Ceremians. They walked through a hall that connected the new inner and outer facilities and, at its end, opened onto the plain. Ariel stepped outside, registered a small pang as she passed by Jacob's grave, and went to stand in the tall grass, well away from the terminal so as to be readily visible. It was 9:45 a.m. Two black Ceremians swooped down promptly at 10 a.m., breaking with those black engulfing wings at the last moment in typical fashion. Ariel was standing with Derek on her right and Woolruff on her left. Adam Silverside should have been standing behind Derek instead of to his right, But Ariel had no control over that, and Derek apparently didn't care. That forced her to share the center of the line with Derek. The aliens seemed not to notice. Snappo came to stand in front of Ariel. "Sarko and I are pleased to meet with you again, small leader." It was Sarko then who was standing in front of Derek. A faint but pungent puff of ammonia tingled the tip end of her nose. She controlled the sneeze with great effort. "Wulraf, Derek and I are equally pleased to meet again with the leaders of the Cerebrons and the Miostrians," she said, "and pleased also to report that our program modifications are complete and being satisfactorily implemented. Our new plans are sharing the plane of Serenity with an equal stand of indigenous grass to minimize the ecological disturbance as our farms spread across the plain." "I am pleased to report that Sarko can find no significant disruption in our weather," Snappo replied. "Nothing that can be attributed to your activities." "That is good news indeed," Ariel said. Diplomatically, there was no way to avoid the bad news. It had to be dealt with before they could leave the planet feeling comfortable in their relations with the Ceremans. She continued without pause. "Now, I must express our sorrow that an unavoidable incident took the life of one of your people and one of ours. That was Neronius, my errant friend and erstwhile assistant. I'm afeard he had brought it on himself, though I regret his behaviour and now his loss. I regret more that he did take one of your people with him. We had thought it was the changeable one you called Silverside. He and Neronius had an earlier meeting which did not end too agreeably. But it was Silverside who arranged this meeting, so it obviously cannot have been him." "Yes, I am Adam Silverside." Adam's voice startled Ariel. She now regretted intensely that she had brought him along. She never intended for Adam to be an active participant in the meeting. Yet there he was, standing beside Derek as though he carried as much weight as Wulraf. Before Ariel could say anything, Adam continued. "Jacob Winterson was the one who was killed. Miss Ariel's personal robot and the one who I am taken as my imprint at one time. I now see now that Neronius must have mistaken him for me. That was not clear until this moment." "We regret that one of us have taken your trusted servant from you, Miss Ariel Welsh," Snappo said, "but we must rejoice that he did not take Adam Silverside as well. Neronius was sick, but refused all offers of help, something we could do little to correct." At that moment Ariel would have welcomed them taking Adam Silverside as well. "We must put all those bad things behind us," she said. "We have other responsibilities, and must now leave your fair planet to resume other, less rewarding efforts. Our robots have all been reprogrammed, their future mission is clear, and I'm sure you will find them pleasant cohabitants. It has been a sincere pleasure to know both of you, Leader Snappo and Leader Sarko. Let me participate to this extent," Sarko said, "that I assure you on your departure that all Miosirians will endeavor to do what is best for those you leave behind, both the Miosirians and your robots." "Speaking of those we leave behind," Ariel said, "one last thought. You will find that we have left both the farm and the city operations under the supervision of a robot we call Wheeler, who now has the form of a small Ceremian, the only robot on the planet with that form. His robotic laws recognize Ceremians with the same weight accorded to humans. Thus, he and the other robots will carry out any orders you choose to give them." "Who knows what the future may hold?" Snappo responded. "Your vision at least allows us to handle that future in our own way, and for that we are grateful. And now I echo my colleague's sentiments, Miss Ariel Welsh," Snappo said, "and we say good-bye. May good fortune attend all your future endeavors." The two aliens took to their wings and seemed, thereby, to sail gracefully out of Ariel's life, but not without leaving her severely disturbed, by the good feelings as they departed, by the knowledge that the Wild One had contributed, no matter how unknowingly, to Jacob's death, by the pain of having to remember Jacob so publicly, and now that it was all over and the let-down began to settle in, by the realization that she had been neglecting Derek for a long time. She turned to him then, pulled his head down and gave him a kiss and a hug. When he responded with equal ardor she felt the mantle of leadership slip from her shoulders, and the relief from that burden was so great she felt she would never again grouse over its lack, nor begrudged Derek the privileges of office whenever he chose to assume them. She'd been neglecting someone else, too. She released Derek with her left arm and reached over to get a handful of Wolruff's fur, pulling her into a three-way embrace with Derek. "We've pulled it off," she said. "You guys are something else." Looking around Derek's shoulder, she winked at Adam Silverside. He would know that was meant to include him in the embrace. It was her painless way of thanking him, without his knowing it, and feeling smug and superior, for his last-ditch effort at the cliff of time. It was he who had first jeopardized and then saved the whole show, and strengthened the bond between Sinapo and her in the process. They were a strange pair, Adam and Eve Silverside. Whence did they come? If they didn't profess to obey the laws of robotics, she would have been inclined to term them alien robots. What did the future hold for them? And for that matter, what did the future hold for the rest of them, having to deal, as they must, with Adam and Eve? And thus ends the book! I hope you've all enjoyed. I'm sorry about the very sudden 8-month break around Easter. But now it's done. Next Tuesday, I'll start releasing parts from Lucky Star and the Oceans of Venus. And that'll be the next book I'll be doing. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope you've all had a fantastic holiday season. Yeah. And for any of you who are about to be shunted back to school, have fun, I guess? No, that's a terrible phrasing. Anyway, have a good day. See you all next Tuesday. Bye!